Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
2 certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only 2 best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. Welcome back to part 2 of the Enneagram.
So this is part 2. So if you haven't listened to part 1, you should go do that.
Please don't
first.
listen to this if you haven't listened
It's
to part 1.
not going to make nearly as much sense. So go back to last Friday's episode for part 1 of this, and then come back and join us if you're starting out here.
The Wisdom of the Enneagram, part 2. So if you have not yet taken the Enneagram, we still have in the episode description linked to a couple of different places where you can take it, a free version and a paid version. So you don't have to have taken it in order to listen to this, because it's still going to be interesting and you're still going to be able to recognize, I think, especially if you listen to part 1, you have a suspicion at least about your fundamental type. And so you'll relate to some of the issues we're going to bring up, but you'll get more out of it if you know your type while you're listening to this.
Yeah. So you can click on either the links. There's, like we said last time, there's a lot of places to take it. We're just linking to 2 of them that we have personally taken.
Yeah, there's no right way to take it. There's no official place you can take it.
Nope. So today, now that we've already introduced you to the 9 types, we're going to get more specific into the details of each of the 9 types, including such tantalizing categories as the deadly sins
of each type,
the red flags, the childhood wounds, and also, probably the whole point of the Enneagram, the growth opportunities for each type as well.
I just want to preface this conversation by saying this is an even longer outline than last time, so it could be a longer episode. And more importantly, that I left out a ton of stuff when I made this outline. Well, so much stuff.
Think about as if we had put 100 pages of a college textbook into a podcast.
Yeah, and that's leaving out 90% of the book.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. The first 100 pages are just the preface to then all of the types.
And I didn't even include all the stuff in the 100 pages. So
that's what I'm saying. You couldn't put that much content into 2 podcasts.
I think maybe there's 5% of what I learned in this book in this 2-part podcast series.
So if you are finding this really fascinating, you might want to go read it for yourself.
Or an Enneagram book, if not this Enneagram book.
Sure. There's just so much that goes into it. It's very complicated, but it's also very fascinating.
Yes.
So we're pulling out things that we think are most interesting and helpful for you to know, but there's a lot more that goes into it.
So without further ado, because there are so many different things I want to get into, and these are in not super particular order. They're more just in the order I encountered them in the book, with a few exceptions.
Yep.
We're going to start with the 9 deadly sins, aka passions, is what they prefer to call it, of each type. So they want you to think of it not quite as a sin in the traditional sense, not something bad or evil, but rather the major way we lose our internal balance and become distorted in our thinking and our feeling and our behaving according to each type. Like, what is the major issue that we kind of, struggle with and get tripped up by?
And they do use the 7 deadly sins plus 2 additional. That's why they're calling it that. But you don't have to think of it as a sin. That seems very dire.
Right.
But okay, so let's get into each of them. So for type 1, it is the passion, we'll call it, is anger. This passion might be more accurately described as resentment. Anger in and of itself is not the problem, but in ones, the anger is repressed. So that leads to continual frustration and dissatisfaction with themselves and also with the world.
I mean, as a secondary type 1, I relate a lot to
the anger and resentment piece.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the dissatisfaction with the world and sometimes myself. Mm-hmm. But as a 4, I'm less likely for it to be about me, and it's more likely to be about everybody else. So
nice combination.
Uh-huh. So type 2, their passion is pride, which is interesting because you wouldn't think that about the type that's the helper, but pride refers to an inability or unwillingness to acknowledge one's own suffering. 2s deny many of their own needs while attempting to help others. This passion could often or also be described as vainglory, pride in one's own virtue.
Right. The pride is coming more from, look how helpful I am, versus look how great I am.
Yes.
So for 3, the main passion is deceit. Now, for this type, it's primarily means deceiving yourself into believing that you're only your ego self. So when we believe this, we put our efforts into developing our egos instead of our true nature. We would also call this passion vanity, our attempt to make the ego feel valuable without turning to our spiritual source. So this is more, I'm going to deceive you and maybe myself too into believing that this external thing that I've created is who I really am.
The type 3 is the achiever, so that makes sense because it's about how I look. Like, I want you to think well of me, so I kind of have to have a lot of vanity.
Yep.
If that's true. Like, in order to maintain that.
Represent myself a certain way. That's where the deceit piece can come in.
So 4 is envy. Envy is based on the feeling that something fundamental is missing. Envy leads 4s to feel that others possess qualities that they lack, and 4s long for what is absent, but often fail to notice the many blessings in their lives. I mean, someone just shot me with that right now. I can't tell you how I'm always fixated on what's not there. And
even when everything else is going well.
Even when everything else is going well. And absolutely, I've been like, why is everyone else's problems easier than mine? Just like the envy of like, I want their problems, not my problems, because my problems are harder. Or why do they have stuff that I don't have?
Or I have all these things going for me in my life, but there's this one thing that isn't here, and I'm going to fixate on that. Yep. 5, avarice. 5s feel that they lack inner resources and that too much interaction with others will lead to catastrophic depletion. This passion leads 5s to withhold themselves from contact with the world. Thus, they hold on to their resources and minimize their needs.
Okay, I want to psychoanalyze each of these, but if we're going to get through all the other stuff,
I'm thinking of how much we have.
I know, I'm going to hold, because so much of what I want to say, we're going to say in the rest of this episode. Yep. So it's fine. I'm not going to miss out. See? Fear of missing out on something. Okay, 6 is fear. This passion might be more accurately described as anxiety, because anxiety leads us to be afraid of things that are not actually happening now. 6s walk around in a constant state of apprehension and worry about possible future events. Yeah, this is very true for the 6s I've met. Yeah.
Worry warts. 7, gluttony. Gluttony refers to the insatiable desire to fill oneself up with experiences. So 7s attempt to overcome feelings of inner emptiness by pursuing a variety of positive, stimulating ideas and activities, but they never feel like they have enough. Just more all the time.
That makes so much sense. Okay, 8 is lust, which does not refer to sexual lust. They're lusty in that they are driven by a constant need for intensity, control, and self-extension. Lust causes 8s to try to push everything in their lives to assert themselves willfully. Yeah.
My way or the highway.
They're thirsty, you know?
Yeah, exactly. 9, sloth.
Yep.
I've literally been called people have told me that a sloth
you move at the pace of a sloth.
Is my spirit animal.
It's your patroness.
Totally. So this makes sense to me. Sloth does not simply mean laziness, since 9s can be quite active and accomplished. Rather, it refers to a desire to be unaffected by life. It's an unwillingness to arise with the fullness of one's vitality to engage with life, because then you might come across uncomfortable things that you don't want to look at or deal with.
Yep.
Yeah. It's an avoidance strategy.
Yes. Okay. So, all right. I love that section. Now we're going to move on to some childhood messages, which I'm pumped about because this is some juicy stuff. Okay. All right. I'm going to read you word for word what they say in the book because I think it's better than what I could say. So, we all received many different unconscious messages from our mother and father, as well as from other significant figures during childhood. Those messages had a profound effect on our growing identity and on how much we were allowed to fully be ourselves. Unless our parents were highly developed, conscious human beings themselves, which is mostly not the case, The expansive brilliance of our soul was forced to shut down to varying degrees. Although some of us received many of the following messages, one message tends to be central to each type.
All right, type 1. It's not okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Whether or not they heard that message, that's the message that they interpreted.
Right. Again, you may or may not have heard this directly. This is so much what we're getting into and getting over people pleasing right now. But absolutely, your parents aren't necessarily, sometimes they're saying it directly, but sometimes you're implying it. And it's the message you're unconsciously receiving.
Yep.
So type 2 is it's not okay to have your own needs. One of our best friends is a type 2, and I've heard her say this more times than I can count.
Right.
I feel like it's not okay for me to have needs.
Other people's needs matter. Mine don't matter.
Yes.
Type 3. It's not okay to have your own feelings and identity. More okay what you project than what you're actually feeling.
Type 4. It's not okay to be too functional or too happy because your identity relies on kind of like identifying as the moody one or the sad one or the withdrawn one. And like maybe it's vulnerable to be too happy because life could disappoint you.
Yeah. Type 5, it's not okay to be comfortable in the world, which is why you kind of remove yourself out of it into your thoughts and into your imagination and into intellectualism because you don't want to get too comfortable.
Type 6, it's not okay to trust yourself. Got to rely on those authority figures or those institutions because you can't trust your own judgment or wisdom.
Yep. Type 7, it's not okay to depend on anyone for anything.
Oh,
you have to be the one to create all the things that you want in your life.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure.
Type 8, it's not okay to be vulnerable or to trust anyone. Hence the protectiveness, the kind of not wanting anyone to control you.
Type 9, it's not okay to assert yourself.
I mean, hello.
Don't speak up. Don't express yourself.
Yep.
Just hold it in. Don't make anybody uncomfortable. Yep.
Okay, so related to that, I really, really, really love this next section because, okay, there are certain messages that you needed to hear as children, according to your type, based on these unconscious childhood messages you received. There was kind of like an antidote message that you needed to hear. And are you going to get your parents to tell you now what that antidote message is? No, you're not going to be able to go get that from them. But that's not the point of being a self-actualized adult human. The point is you can start integrating this message for yourself.
Because you still have an inner child.
You can parent your own inner child
within you who is still fearing that those old messages are true. So now you can share the more relevant, accurate, helpful message to your inner child to smooth that over.
So type 1 is you are good.
Yeah, because they're so afraid they're not good.
Or that they're not good enough, that their work isn't good enough. They have to be perfect.
Yep. Type 2, you are wanted.
Right.
You don't have to go out and
try to be needed.
Try to make everyone want you. You are wanted all on your own.
Type 3, you are loved for yourself, not for who you're pretending to be.
Yep. Not for your image. Yep. Type 4, you are seen for who you are.
How many times have I said that?
I want people to see me for me.
I want people to appreciate me for who I am, not who they want me to be. Like, I want to be validated in my identity.
And in your uniqueness.
In my uniqueness, right. Okay. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to read now. Type 5. Your needs are not a problem. That's so interesting because you wouldn't think that's the type 5 message, but it makes sense to me because if type 5s are very much intellectual when they're up in their head and they're almost like observing the world rather than participating in it, it makes sense that what they needed to hear was that your needs are not a problem because it's almost like, well, because my needs are a problem, I have to retreat and I have to have no needs. I can't engage in the world. I just need to live up in my head where I'm not physically demanding anything of anyone. Yeah.
Type 6, you are safe.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's so much fear of not being secure.
And stable.
And so you're safe. You don't have to keep striving and trying to believe all the things you're trying to believe and follow all the rules you're trying to follow.
Yep.
To be secure.
Type 7, you will be taken care of. Related to some of the other ones, but I like the association between that and, again, the type 7 who's bouncing often from thing to thing to thing, always looking for that next thing that's going to make them happy. It's like they don't trust that they're going to be taken care of or that they're going to get their needs met or that the universe will be able to deliver them happiness. So they constantly got to be out there seeking, and not being taken care of.
Yep. Type 8, you will not be betrayed.
Oh,
You don't have to constantly be suspicious of everyone and
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
It's going to jump out and betray you. You're going to be okay.
mm-hmm. Yeah. You can trust the world is
Yeah.
another way I would say that. Like you can trust people.
Yeah.
And then type 9, your presence matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your opinion matters. Your thoughts matter.
Especially if you fear you can't speak up. You definitely need to hear that, no, your opinion matters. Your
Yes.
presence here is significant.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And so okay, you're like, why are you just reading these lists of things? Because I think it's so imperative that you understand what these core wounds and these core messages and the core things you needed to hear are in order to understand how to then grow out of it, which we're going to get to eventually.
And there's going to be some that you probably heard us say. And you're like, oh, I wish I'd heard that.
Yeah.
Or I did hear that other childhood message and I feel like it stuck with me. So if you can understand that these are normal, it's normal for you to have picked up on those messages, you can give yourself a more helpful message.
Well,
based on your type.
also, again, a huge reason I value the Enneagram now is because it depersonalizes. I should have said this in the first episode, but I think we probably alluded to the point. But it depersonalizes things that you thought were unique to you.
Yes.
Because a lot of you probably have heard messages like, you shouldn't have needs, or you shouldn't speak up, or your opinion doesn't matter. And you think that's a unique fear and experience unto yourself. And when you realize, no, this is almost like a type problem, and that your childhood wounds and those early experiences don't create your type. You come in born into a type, and then your childhood experiences can exacerbate the problem. And not just childhood, but your life experiences can make you lean further into your type. So these are not unique problems, which hopefully helps you release your hold on them a little bit and opens you up to the possibility of growing, because you don't have to take it so personally. You don't even have to analyze all of these thoughts, because you're like, oh, this is just what a type 7 thinks.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's maybe the biggest relief I've had thus far in understanding the Enneagram, is that I don't have to overanalyze all of the things that are coming up around my type 4-ness, because it's just type 4 stuff.
You don't have to over-identify with it. Like, oh, this is so me. Like, no, it's just
Type 4 stuff.
That's a normal thing for a type 4.
I don't
or
have
a
to
type 9 or whatever.
Cling to it. I can kind of let it go, because this is just going to kind of be my knee jerk, and I don't have to go with my knee jerk.
Yeah.
Yes. So
this next section is really interesting. This is what they're calling wake-up calls. So there are certain patterns that each type has that serves as their kind of spiritual jump start. Kind of like, these are the things that when you notice yourself doing them, could be wake-up calls.
Yeah,
for you.
You're going to struggle with them the most. But when you recognize them and you're not ignoring them anymore.
You're like, oh, I'm doing that thing again.
Yes, it's an invitation to like go there and work through it. That's how you grow.
Right. This is where your car is going to go.
Right, when you're veering off the path, and you take your hand off the wheel.
Yeah. And so this is your wake-up call, like, oh, time to put my hand back on the wheel. I'm doing that thing that I do.
Yep. So for type 1s, that's feeling a sense of personal obligation to fix everything themselves. So if you're doing that, no, you're headed off in the wrong direction. You got to put your hand back on the wheel.
This is kind of like, you might have heard us talk about this before, but when you're driving on the highway, you know, there's those rumble strips on the side of the highway.
To make sure you wake up and don't veer off into a ditch.
Yeah. So when you veer a little bit over the line, you're like, vibrating the whole car. Just to remind you, get back in your lane. That's what these are.
Yeah.
So these are reminding you, get back in your lane. Okay.
Right. So 1s don't need to fix everything yourself. You can ask for help. You don't you don't need to be a perfect person.
And you're not responsible for everything. You can let that go.
Also, the dishwasher doesn't have to be loaded exactly to your specifications, but I'm still working on that one.
The dishes will get clean.
I don't believe that they will get clean if they are loaded improperly, but we cannot spend a whole hour talking about that.
Okay. Type 2's wake-up call is believing that they must go out to others to win them over.
Yeah.
I have to go out and I have to do things for you, improve myself, and be likable and be helpful to win you over.
Yes.
So that you like me.
Right. So you're in red flag zone if you're in the mood of, I need to win these people over, rather than they can come to me.
Yep.
And they will love me as I am.
Or they won't, and that's fine too.
And who cares? Because there's plenty of love to go around. I don't need it from everybody.
Exactly.
Type 3, beginning to drive themselves for status and attention. Yeah. So if you're in that, like, gotta prove myself, gotta, like, get that attention or validation
I want
mode.
the promotion because it will make me like feel
like I've achieved
look
something
good on my resume, or people are going to be proud of me, but I don't know if I really care.
Yep.
Just question your motivations and your intentions.
Yep. You're being trapped by your type a little bit too much.
Yep. Type 4, holding on to and intensifying feelings through the imagination. So if you have a feeling and you're like really just indulging that feeling a bit and intensifying it.
This is like you're being a moody bitch for no reason. You're just I'm going to sit in it all day.
You're
marinating
settling into it.
I do that.
You're milking it.
I do that a lot. I do. I know. You know what? It's a red flag for a reason.
That's your wake-up call.
Okay. 5. Withdrawing from reality into concepts and mental worlds. So if you're escaping into your brain, you might be a type 5.
Or escaping into books or concepts or ideas.
Oops, I do that. Yeah. I do this too. I do. Yeah. Especially escaping into books.
Because you don't want to be in the world.
Yeah.
Type 6. Becoming dependent on something outside of yourself for guidance. So when you get super attached to other people's advice or to certain rules or regulations, because you don't trust yourself, that's your indication. Wait a minute, pause.
This is when you're Googling everything, right? Instead of using your own intuition.
Yes. Check in with yourself when you notice yourself doing that.
For type 7, the wake-up call is feeling that something better is available somewhere else.
FOMO.
Grass is greener. FOMO.
Yeah, it's FOMO.
Yes.
When you feel FOMO, that's your wake-up call to check in with your type.
I have a client who I'm just realizing, I haven't talked to her in a while, but she must be a type 7 because this is her constant problem, is feeling like there's got to be something better over there. And she's never satisfied. And it's hard because when I was coaching her, it was before I knew about the Enneagram. So now I'm like, I figured it out. But it feels like, you can take it really seriously, and it feels like you need to fix that. Okay, well, maybe there is something better. When you realize you're a type 7, you're like, oh no, I'm just really doing that thing. I'm too deep into type 7 right now. And we'll talk about the direction you need to grow in so that you can escape from these types, not escape, but that you can grow out of these types of patterns.
Yeah, these are just your wake-up calls.
Right. But it doesn't mean you need to, this is the point, is you don't need to act on these impulses. The impulse in itself does not mean something about who you are. It's literally just a wiring problem in your brain. It is just one of the downsides of being your particular type. And you don't need to over-identify with it. You don't need to go do it. You just need to be aware of it and then realize I'm doing that thing. I don't actually have to act on it because that's just a type 7 or a type 4 or type 1 problem, whatever.
Yep. Okay, so type 8 wake-up call. Feeling like they must push and struggle to make things happen.
Yes.
Like life is a battle.
Yes.
And I got to keep fighting for myself. When you feel kind of like your boxing gloves come up, like don't mess with me.
Yes.
That's just your type coming out. It's your wake-up call. You don't have to fight everyone. You don't have to make everything happen in the world.
No, things can happen on their own without you pushing and forcing and striving for it to happen.
Life is not all about struggle all the time.
Life can be easy.
Yes.
And then type 9, outwardly accommodating themselves to others. Oh, do you recognize yourself in that?
Oh, yeah.
Good. It's crazy how accurate that is. That's so funny.
When you find yourself being like, oh, that's fine. Whatever you want. Or where you want to go to dinner? Whatever you want. That's your type 9 coming out, just trying to be accommodating and not stir up ruffle any feathers. And you can actually check in and say, what do I want to do here? Speak up for yourself.
Okay. So we were talking about over-identifying with your personality type. So there's something I want to read to you directly from the book. Sorry, you're probably going to hear me rustling pages, but that's because I'm being a dork and I'm like referencing my book while I do a podcast. It's actually a type 5
We've got 2 books. We've got notes. You guys, we're like nerding out right now.
Okay, so I wanted to read you this from the book because I thought it was such a good summary of this issue. So, over time, our identification with a certain set of qualities, such as strength, empathy, peacefulness, or spontaneity, to name just a few, becomes fixed, and our type's characteristic sense of self is established. The feelings and states that comprise our sense of self are those we think are necessary for achieving our basic desire. And reminder, we talked about the basic desires at the end of last episode. The more we identify with our sense of self, the more we become locked into it, and the more we forget that other choices and other modes of being are available to us. We start to believe that we are this pattern. We focus on only certain qualities from the total range of our human potential, as if saying, these qualities are me, but these are not. I am this way, but not that way. Thus, we develop a self-image and a self-definition, like, based on our personality type.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like you over-relate to it because your ego wants a home base. It wants to feel safe. So it wants to relate more to certain qualities that come naturally, and other qualities get kind of pushed aside, even though you could integrate and adapt those because you need to have some fixed sense of self.
Right.
And your ego is afraid not to let you have a fixed sense of self.
So if I want to identify in this certain way, I have to act and think and behave in these ways. So we're going to go through, again, each of the 9 and say, what are these identifiers that you are identifying with, maybe overly identifying with, and what is the image that you're trying to create within yourself and to others?
Mm-hmm.
So for type 1, they identify powerfully with the superego, so with the capacity to evaluate, compare, measure, and discern experiences or things. They resist recognizing anger-based tensions. So all of this is in the name of the self-image of being reasonable, being sensible, objective, moderate, prudent, moral, good, and rational.
Mm-hmm. Which is, they're, again, all fine things to be, but not to the exclusion of everything else.
You can over-identify with them.
Yes. So basically, this is a list of things we over-identify with.
Yep.
To the exclusion of other important things that could help us become a more fully developed human.
A more holistic person.
So for 2s, they over-identify with feelings for and about others and feelings about others' responses to them. They resist recognizing their own feelings about themselves and their needs, which means the self-image they're over-identifying with is loving and caring and selfless, thoughtful, warm-hearted, concerned, kind, and compassionate.
Mm-hmm. A type 3 identifies powerfully with a self-image developed in response to what they perceive as admiration by others.
Yeah.
They resist recognizing feelings of emptiness and their own self-rejection. So this is all in the name of sustaining the self-image of being admirable, desirable, attractive, outstanding, well-adjusted, effective, and having unlimited potential.
Yeah. That's how you want people to see you. And so you have to sustain that.
And it's how you want to see yourself. So you have to keep acting in a certain way.
Yeah. So 4s over-identify with feelings of otherness, of being flawed, and with their emotional reactions on a daily basis, literally. Like thinking, I am that feeling. They resist recognizing authentic, positive qualities in themselves and where they are like other people.
Uh-huh.
They do this to maintain a sense of, to over-maintain, if you ask me, a sense of self that's sensitive and different, unique, self-aware, gentle. I'm not gentle, but intuitive, quiet, deep, and honest with yourself. Again, all technically good qualities, but if you over-relate to them,
you can take it too far.
You take it too far, and then you don't have balance.
You don't have access to other also important qualities.
Yes. If you over-identify with your feelings as a type 4, you think every feeling you have is you. That's a huge problem.
Yeah. Right. So for a type 5, they overly identify with a sense of being detached and an outside observer of the world instead of being part of it. They resist recognizing physical presence and state, feelings, and needs. This is all in the maintenance of a self-image of being perceptive, smart, curious, self-contained, insightful, unusual, alert, and objective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so type 6s, they're over-identifying with the need to respond and react to inner anxiety about perceived lack of support, which basically means they're constantly identifying with the worst case scenario and their anxiety. They are anxiety machines. Mm-hmm. They are resisting recognizing support that does exist and their own inner guidance and wisdom.
Yep.
And they over-identify so that they can relate to being reliable, dependable, trustworthy, likable, regular, quote unquote, like whatever regular means.
The opposite of type 4, which is unique.
Special, right? Careful, having foresight, and questioning.
Okay, so type 7 overly identify with a sense of excitement coming from anticipating future positive experiences. They resist recognizing personal pain and anxiety. And this is because they want to maintain that self-image of being enthusiastic, free-spirited, spontaneous, cheerful, eager, outgoing, energetic, and positive. I
want to say more about that, but there's so much more to say that I have to rein it in. Type 8, they over-identify with a sense of intensity coming from resisting or challenging other people and the environment. So, like, they see themselves as, like, a fighter, and they like that about themselves.
Yep.
Overly much, if you ask the Enneagram people. They resist recognizing their own vulnerability and need for nurturing, which means
that's weakness.
Yeah. So they over-identify as being strong, assertive, direct, resourceful, action-oriented, tenacious, robust, and independent. That's spot on for the 8s I know.
Yep. For type 9, they over-identify with a sense of inner stability coming from disengagement from intense impulses and feelings. They resist recognizing their own strength and capacity. And this is all in the name of the self-image of being peaceful, relaxed, stable, steady, gentle, natural, easygoing, and friendly. Oh, yeah. I have called myself like, oh, that's just me.
That's who I am.
That's who I am.
No, you're over-identifying with that.
Yep.
When you should be identifying with some of these other traits that the other people have, like being unique. Like,
Right,
a 9 could really benefit from a 4's desire to feel unique.
Totally. Right. You're allowed to be the things you are, but not an exclusion of all the other great qualities that you also have access to.
To your detriment. Like, that list
Exactly.
was about things you're over-identifying with to your detriment.
Yes.
So, okay, we're going to leave that there for now. We're going to talk about some major, like, we got 3 big sections left to talk about that are all major in their own way. So the first, and this is such a frustrating thing because there are so many ways that you can break these down. So the 9 types can all be broken down into various triads. In the book, there's 3 major triads. So there's different ways you can break down, you can group them together that according to the things that they have in common. So we're only going to talk about one of the major triads because we do not have time to talk about all 3. We're going to talk about the one that I think is the most relevant and just the one that I think has the most meat to talk about. So one major way that the types can be grouped together is according to the 3 main centers of the human body. So your instincts, your feelings, and your thinking, which also correspond to the 3 basic components of your brain. So the root brain, which is your instinctual brain, your limbic system, which is your emotional brain, and your cerebral cortex, which is your thinking brain.
So keep in mind, because we're talking about these 3 different subcategories.
We're going to tell you which types go with each thinking or feeling or instinct.
But keep in mind that just because you're in, for example, the feeling triad, that doesn't mean that you have more feelings than other people. Or if you're in the thinking triad, it doesn't mean that you're more intelligent or a deeper thinker than other people.
It's actually kind of the opposite in that it's the thing that your ego has formed the most strongly around, and therefore it's the component of your psyche that is least able to function freely.
Yeah, it's almost like you've kind of blocked that piece off in a way, and you don't have access to it freely.
Or you're almost like, freely can mean you're overly emphasizing it, or you're underemphasizing it, or you're denying it, or you're repressing it. It's like the thing you have the most baggage around.
It's not the most natural flow.
Yes. So we're going to talk about each one corresponds to a major feeling. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to kind of give you the rundown of which camp each type falls into. It's really fascinating. This is maybe one of my favorite parts of the Enneagram, like low-key, one of my favorite parts.
Okay, so we'll first describe the instinctive triad.
Which I like to think of as the gut. Like it corresponds to your gut.
Yeah, right. There's kind of the thinking, feeling, intuition.
Which, to be fair, what it means with this is you struggle the most with your gut. Not that you are the most instinctive, that you struggle the most with your instincts in some way or another.
So this is a group of 3 types. 8, 9, and 1 are the types in this instinctive triad. And they're concerned with maintaining resistance to reality, creating boundaries for the self that are based on physical tensions. These types tend to have problems with aggression and repression. Underneath their ego defenses, they carry a great deal of rage.
So let me Enneagram explain this to you guys, okay? Because this is a very meaty section of the book. It deserves a ton of attention that I can't give it. But to put it in as simple terms as I can, 8s, 9s, and 1s really struggle. The maintaining resistance to reality is really interesting because you wouldn't think that each of those types are having trouble with reality. But what it means is that they each have a very different relationship with reality. And the main emotion they come at reality with is anger. So for 8s, what that means is they want the world to look the way they damn well want it to look. And they're going to force themselves upon the world in order to make that happen.
They use rage toward the external world.
I'm going to do 9 last because I think it actually fits better to do it last. Type 1s are more so resisting reality internally, and they're repressing their anger. They're not feeling it. They're just taking all of their stuff and they're putting it on themselves. So resistance of reality for a 1 can look like, I refuse to not be perfect. I refuse for my reality to not be like perfect. I need to make it what I want it to be. But the way I do that is by beating myself up, not by forcing myself upon the world like an 8 does, but by beating myself up and criticizing myself and shaming myself so that I will like sort of conform to the notion of reality that I think is right.
9s
yes.
will deny reality externally, as in I don't want to experience or be a part of or see things that disrupt my reality.
Yes.
And I also don't want to see things internally. So I don't want to look at gut feelings that are making me uncomfortable. I don't want to acknowledge things within myself that are going to disrupt my inner peace.
Yes.
And so they're doing it on both fronts, internally and externally.
Which is so exhausting when you have to ignore reality, deny reality. You know, 8s express anger, 1s repress anger, and 9s deny that anger is even happening.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason anger is related to this type and the reason anger and denying reality are related is that anger is the natural emotion that comes up when you're resisting being who you really are and you're resisting how things really are. Is that your natural emotion about that is pissed. Like, I'm pissed off. I don't want to be who I am. I want to be free to see things as they are. You get pissed about that.
And then the different types deal with their rage in different ways.
Yeah, they take it out on themselves. They take it out on other people. Or they deny that it's happening at all if you're a 9. So I could go on about that, but that's a good summary of the instinctive triad, which their major problem is rage.
Yep.
Which, isn't it funny? When I first told you that, you were like, no, I don't have any rage.
No. So
you acted like a 9.
So spot on. I'm such a 9.
Okay, so the second type is the feeling triad. 2s, 3s, and 4s are concerned with self-image. They are attached to the false or assumed self of their personality. They believe that the stories they tell about themselves and their assumed qualities are their actual identity. Underneath their ego defenses, these types carry a great deal of shame. So another way to say that is sadness. Like their major emotion that they're rumbling with, as Brene Brown would say, is shame or sadness.
Right. So again, these express themselves differently.
Yeah.
So for example,
self-image is like the thing that they're trying to control, whereas in the instinctive type, it was reality that they were trying to distort. The feeling triad are distorting their own self-image, and what that leads to is sadness, but the way they relate to that sadness, very different.
Right. So for 2s, they need their self-image to come from how I'm helping other people. It's coming from this outward reality.
Just
my
like
relationships
8s are pushing out, so are 2s, pushing outward.
Yep.
With their self-image.
Yep. 4s, we're going to skip over 3s.
Yeah.
4s are doing the opposite. They need to maintain their own internal sense of their own image. And like, I am who I am, and I am unique.
And I'm different, and I'm special. Yes. So we experience sadness, therefore, in a very internal kind of way. And so we can get this category obviously can get depressed easily.
Yeah.
Like the feelings, because you're so naturally like, anyway, I'll talk about why sadness, just like we talked about why rage in the last type. But yes, 4s are pushing it inward. It's all about, inwardly feeling sad and inwardly feeling like you have to maintain an identity unto yourself. And honestly, you don't often care what people think when you're a type 4 because you actually want to be different than everyone else.
Right.
Yeah. But it is. You're still obsessed with your image.
Right. And 3s, again, are worried about their self-image on both fronts. So first of all, they want other people to think a certain thing about
Think highly
them.
of them. Yeah.
Yes, their accomplishments and their achievements and who they are. And they also want to think highly of themselves. I think one of the things that we read in here was that 3s are most likely to believe their own press releases.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
They'll tell themselves the stories that they want to believe, as well as telling other people what they want to believe. So they're constantly trying to maintain their image within themselves and in the world at the same time, which again, exhausting to play on both fronts like that.
Yeah. So why sadness is because, and this is just how I'm summarizing it, is because if your main fixation is on your self-image, I think sadness is the result because one of your, like, I think the core message is in some way who I am isn't really enough. Like who I really am isn't enough. So
right. It's sadness and it's shame.
It's shame. So twos have to grapple with that shame by projecting who they think other people want them to be and helping people and fixing people. Fours take that shame and they're like, well, I'm just going to build a sense of self internally that's different and unique and special and screw the world, right? Mm-hmm. And then threes are, I'm going to do both.
Yeah. Okay. So now we are in the thinking triad. So this is comprised of types 5, 6, and 7, which are concerned primarily with anxiety. They experience a lack of support and guidance. They engage in behaviors that they believe will enhance their safety and security. And underneath their ego defenses, these types carry a great deal of fear.
I think this one is the easiest to understand because if you're like an anxiety machine, a 5, 6, or 7, the 7s, what are they doing? Just like an 8 and a 2, they're pushing it outward. So that's why they're like, I don't want to think about my anxiety. I don't want to feel that. So I'm just going to like bounce from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. I'm going to force myself onto the world to run away from my anxiety and my fear.
Whereas 5s want to retreat out of the world into their minds.
I'm going to disconnect from the world in the same way.
To deal with my anxiety because I don't know how to handle it. So I'm just going to go kind of move out of the world and live in my brain and my imagination and in my intellect.
And 6s do both, which is why they tend to be the biggest of the anxiety machines.
Right, because they're trying to fight off anxiety inside and outside all the time.
So I really, really like that. We could go on about that, but it's so interesting it just makes so much sense when you think of that. Like, it never occurred to me that, like you, Kristen, had this relationship with anger. But now that when I read that, it just made so much sense to me.
Yeah.
That your relationship with anger was denying that it was even happening.
Right.
And that my relationship with sadness is very much this internal experience that I'm cultivating at the expense of ignoring often good things that are happening to me. Because I'm like, I overly relate with being like, hashtag like that bitch. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And remember that this is just one of the groupings. So all of these different types have a lot of things in common. This is the grouping of commonalities that we chose to describe.
But there's two other major triads.
But they can get grouped in other ways. So these groups are not always the same.
There's another, I don't know enough, but there's one that's more about like your outlook on life, like positivity or not. And then there's another one that's about how engaged or not you are with life. So are you a withdrawn type? You and I are both withdrawn types, by the way. Which kind of makes sense because, I mean, I can see that like that is a thing we have in common.
Totally.
So, okay. Now, we're finally going to get into how do you grow? Like, we've really probably made you feel like crap up until now about, oh my God, my type sucks. But it's like everyone's type sucks. Like, don't feel bad about it. We all have our problems and our gifts. And the Enneagram is meant to help you, wake the F up about the patterns that you've been overly relating to and that have been holding you hostage so that you can break free of them. So now we're going to talk about, like...
We're all going to tell you where you can disintegrate into even further.
Sure. But at the end of this section, we're going to actually get into some like growth stuff. But yeah, you're right. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves here.
Whatever type you are in, you can devolve into some areas where you're like, ooh, this is really not serving me.
Not areas. Let's say this another way. You have a type. You can either devolve into another type.
Yes.
Or you can evolve into a different type.
Correct.
Okay.
So usually you're devolving into the challenges of a different type, or you're evolving into the best qualities of another type.
Which doesn't mean that your type changes or anything. It just means that when you're at your worst, like you're stressed out or you're under pressure, you, quote unquote, you act out in the direction of a particular type. And then when you're at your best, you adopt certain empowering qualities of another type. So we're going to talk about the ones you devolve into is your direction of disintegration, and the ones we evolve into is your direction of integration.
We told you this was getting complicated, guys. So keep up with us.
Yeah, but it's gonna make sense. So we're gonna first talk about your direction of disintegration. So the type you end up kind of acting out as when you're under stress or pressure.
So a type 1, which are usually very methodical, will suddenly become moody and irrational because they will disintegrate into some of the qualities of a 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay, like I could go on, but like I'm just going to read these so that you can kind of see yourself, and maybe we'll give some examples, but it's going to make sense. So, needy type 2s suddenly become aggressive and dominating at type 8. This is an easy one to give an example of because you've totally seen those people who are like giving and giving and giving and they don't get anything back and then they explode.
They just snap.
And they get really angry that their needs aren't getting met. That's because the type 2 is disintegrating into a type 8.
Where there's that aggression.
Yes.
Type 3, which are very driven, will suddenly become disengaged and apathetic at 9. So if they go, 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 and they're not getting what they want, they'll just be like, well, why even bother? And
they'll start
I'll stop trying.
Yeah, right.
Like
they'll
that
adopt
9
that deadly sin of sloth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Apathy.
So aloof 4s suddenly become over-involved and clingy at 2. Yes. I haven't done this in a long time, but absolutely. When I was like a teenager and my boyfriend was ignoring me, I would get super clingy and like, so I wouldn't even recognize myself. But now I'm realizing, I was stressed out. I was becoming a needy, clingy type 2.
Right. Keep in mind, you're taking on like the worst qualities of each of these.
Right. We're not
like
really
not all 2s are needy, but you can take on the neediness part of a 2.
Well, right.
So detached 5s will suddenly become hyperactive and scattered at 7. So when they get stressed out and overwhelmed, they'll just do all the things and devolve into that hyperactivity.
Well, it's almost like they're compensating. Again, all of these are almost like when you get stressed, you tend to then bounce into another extreme to compensate for your stress.
So if you've been all up in your head and not engaged, all of a sudden you overly engage with the world too much.
And then you become scattered. So dutiful 6s suddenly become competitive and arrogant at 3. Which makes sense. You're like, I've been so loyal. I've been following the rules. Things aren't working out for me. So screw it. Like, I'm just going to come kind of like holier than thou. And I'm going to beat all these other people. I'm not going to play by these rules anymore.
So scattered 7s will suddenly become perfectionistic and critical at 1.
Have you not seen some of your side hustler clients who probably are type 7 doing this? Where they're like, I just like, why can't I make a decision?
Yes.
I'm so indecisive. What's wrong with me? Like, I just need to pick something and go with it.
Get over it already.
Yes.
Very, very hard on themselves.
I've definitely
very
seen that.
self-critical.
So type self-confident 8s suddenly become secretive and fearful at 5. So, they've been like forcing themselves upon the world. They're like, oh yeah,
this is who I am.
This is who I am. But then they'll devolve into like this kind of like suspicious, like conspiracy theorist. You know what I'm thinking about right now, don't you? Totally. We're not going to talk about it, but you know who I'm talking about right now. Okay.
And complacent 9s will suddenly become anxious and worried at 6.
I've seen you devolve in that direction.
Oh yeah, this makes total sense to me. This is where the 6 comes out, is when I am in that disintegrating, de-evolving space.
Okay, so
we want to give you some hope now too, though.
Yes. So again, each type also has a type that you can evolve into, and you can
essentially take on the best qualities
adopt
of that
the best
type.
version of that type. So angry and critical 1s can become spontaneous and joyful like healthy 7s. Okay. Also note, this is probably too confusing, but so one type's disintegration is another type's integration. So for example, a 1 integrates toward type 7, but a 7 disintegrates toward type 1. So there is a pattern here, but we don't have to get into it.
Yeah, you don't have to think too hard about that.
But that makes sense because 1s who are kind of uptight, they let loose a little bit. That's a good thing, right? Like take that stick out of your ass. I say as a partial type 1, I'm allowed to say that.
Right. So prideful, self-deceptive 2s will become more self-nurturing and emotionally aware like healthy 4s.
This makes a lot of sense to me.
Right, because they're so nurturing externally. So when you turn that inward, that can be a really healthy thing where you're like, I'm going to take care of myself now, not just everyone
I'm going to
else.
Indulge myself instead of everyone else. Because that's
treat yourself.
Treat yourself. That's what 4s are great at, is treating themselves too much. But again, if you're not doing it enough, it makes sense that it's healthy to take on that aspect of that type. Okay. So vain and deceitful 3s can become more cooperative and committed to others like healthy 6s. That makes sense. You're becoming more dutiful and loyal like a good 6.
Right. Envious, emotionally turbulent 4s will become more objective and principled like healthy 1s. So it makes sense that you have a good amount of 1.
Well, maybe that's a reflection of the fact that I've done some growing over the course of my life because I have a lot of 1 energy. Now, I think it shows up in negative ways too, but it makes sense that you can kind of, again, if you're indulgent a lot with yourself, that a 1 would be a good place to counter because
more like
a little bit more structured, a little bit more order, a little bit more discipline with yourself. Not a bad thing. Oh, is it my turn?
Yes.
Oh, avaricious, detached 5s become more self-confident and decisive like healthy 8s. So instead of living up in their head, they're like, I'm going to go at the world like a confident 8, just showing up and doing the damn thing.
Fearful, pessimistic 6s will become more relaxed and optimistic like healthy 9s. It's like you're so anxious all the time. You're like, just let it go.
Chill out, bro. It's all good. Yeah, for
let
sure.
Let it go. Makes sense.
Yeah,
that's
it makes
a
a lot of
healthier
sense.
way of dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, gluttonous, scattered 7s become more focused and profound like healthy 5s. So they, again, if you're a 7, you're often going at the world in the sense of you're doing all the things and you're scattered and you're like going from thing to thing to thing to thing without maybe often thinking ahead.
So let's get into our own thoughts.
Healthy
let's come
5.
into ourselves a little bit.
Healthy thinking about things ahead of time.
Yes.
Planning.
Lustful, controlling 8s will become more open-hearted and caring like healthy 2s.
Yes.
It's like you're so aggressive and like everyone's out to get you. And instead, you know what?
Put your guard down.
Yeah, people are naturally good. We can help them. It feels good
Open
to
your
help
heart.
them. Yes.
Have some vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yes. And then slothful, self-neglecting 9s become more self-developing and energetic like a healthy 3.
Right. So instead of always being like, no, I'm not going to deal with
A little
that.
bit more vanity is not a bad thing when you're a 9.
Yeah. I have things to say and I want to be out there in the world and I want to present myself in the best light and all of those things.
Right.
Before you were kind of just taking a back seat.
So integration, let me just say this really clearly, is not about faking it till you make it, okay? It's not like what you think you should do. It's a process of letting go of aspects of your type that's blocking you so that when you let go of those like defenses and attitudes and fears of your type, you experience sort of an organic unfolding in the direction of your integration type. But it's not like I'm going to pretend to be a 1 now to be healthy.
Right.
No. It's the direction you end up proceeding into when you're willing to question and work through the fears and the insecurities and the common hangups of your type.
Right. So in other words, it's helping us express the full potential of our type by providing some balance. We don't want to get so focused on our area that we miss out on some complementary qualities. This allows you to bring in the complementary qualities so you can just come at life a little bit more balanced.
Yeah. So for example, they gave this in the book and I liked it. If you're a type 4 who's, again, very creative and you want to express yourself through music, well, you would then be benefited by a type 1's natural tendency for self-discipline, right? Like like if you're a type 9 and you're not good at expressing yourself or speaking up, then taking some of that, getting to the point where you're adopting
more of that achiever energy.
Yeah, and a little bit more of that, I have something to say and I want people to think highly of me is not so bad.
Right.
So, okay. The last major thing I want to say, this is also one of my favorite parts of the Enneagram. I just love the Enneagram.
I know, there's so much good stuff here.
I really love it, but... So I want to share with you the ultimate direction in which you're heading if you take on kind of like the work of the Enneagram. When the trappings of your personality are left behind, each type wakes up and remembers a vital truth about your core essence. So like, this is the thing you have forgotten and that doing the work of the Enneagram will help you to remember. And when I say doing the work of the Enneagram, this is exactly what we do in coaching, BT dubs. Like helping you drop the fears and the insecurities that came hardwired into you, helping you see the world in a different perspective, helping you integrate more healthy patterns and behaviors. All of that leads you to this place where you remember this vital thing that you feel like has been missing from your essence.
Where you're not so connected to that personality aspect anymore because you understand this bigger, greater truth that's always been within you. So we're going to go through the types one more time.
Type 1 remembers the essential quality of perfection, which means there's no need to be a perfectionist because everything's already unfolding exactly as it should.
You don't have to be the one creating the perfection.
No.
It's already in perfect order.
Yeah, the universe is already perfect. You don't got to do a damn thing to be perfect. You can be imperfect because your soul is already perfect. Know what I'm saying?
When you really buy into these, especially the one related to your type, you're just going to feel like your shoulders relax.
Yeah.
Just like relief. Like, oh, yes, this is what I always wanted to believe.
This is what you're striving to get to through the trappings of your personality. Like a 1 is trying to get back to perfection, but they're doing it in the wrong way.
They forgot that everything's already perfect.
Well, they're doing it through trying to control and trying to like perfect their behavior. And all they really need to do is to remember that things already are perfect.
Yes.
Yes.
So in that same vein, a type 2 will remember the essential quality of unconditional love. So when love can never be lost, there's nothing you need to get from anyone else, nor anything you're obligated to give. There's just unconditional love available to you at all times in all kinds of places. You don't need it from specific people. You don't have to you don't have to
cling to it or
manipulate
be desperate
yourself
for it.
to get it from other people. It's always there for you.
Right. So you can relax. You don't need to go like knocking from door to door, getting it from everybody. Type 3 remembers the essential quality of authenticity. There's nothing to prove because you are valuable simply because you exist, which means you're free to be your true self.
You don't have to put up any images or you don't have to be any particular way. Okay, so type 4 remembers the essential quality of renewal. When our identity isn't equivalent to our feelings, we're allowed to evolve, transform, and create over and over again. So you don't get so trapped in this feeling I'm having right now.
This is who I am. Everything is who I am.
Right, exactly. You don't get so hyper attached to it because everything's renewing all the time. Everything is evolving. Everything's going to move into
nothing
the next
lasts forever.
Phase. Yeah.
And so therefore I don't have to be attached to any of it. And
this will pass. This too shall pass.
This too shall pass. And I can integrate all of it. I can be all of the things instead of just that moody bitch. Okay. Type 5 remembers the essential quality of clarity. There's no need to overthink everything because you have permanent access to a deeper source of knowledge within yourself, like your intuition.
Type 6s remember the essential quality of support. There's no need to rely on everything outside of you when you can trust the benevolence of the universe.
Yes.
You don't need things or people or rules to give you that sense of security. You're always secure. You're always supported.
Yes, the universe has your back.
Yes.
Type 7 remembers the essential quality of joy. When we have no claims on life, everything can become a divine gift capable of sweeping you into ecstasy.
You don't have to keep seeking it around every corner.
You can find happiness in small things, right? Yes. And you don't have to be constantly like the grass is greener over there. You can find it right in your own backyard.
Exactly. Type 8 remembers the essential quality of innocence. When you're backed by the will of the universe, you can let your guard down. You don't have to be tough and power through everything.
I like that.
We're all
like a return to like childlike, like you can let your guard down and just be an innocent.
Before you got jaded and hardened.
Yep. And type 9 remembers the essential quality of wholeness. When everything is interconnected, there is no separateness between you and anything else. And therefore, no need to merge with everything and everyone around you.
That's a very 9 thing.
Yeah.
To feel like I need to merge. Nope.
We're already all connected. So
you're whole as you are. You don't need to merge with anyone else to become whole.
Yes. So that was it. 2 parts of the Enneagram, and we did not even cover all of it.
I feel like we ran a marathon. You might need to listen to this one a few times over. That would be okay. We just jam-packed with information.
So, I'm going to say this because we just planted so many seeds, and so your heads are probably spinning in a good way, I hope. But if you're like, I want to work on this, this is what we do in coaching.
Yes.
Like Kristen and I are actually getting very much into exploring the Enneagram with our clients, and knowing someone's Enneagram type is a game changer with the way I coach them.
It's so helpful for you to understand yourself, but also for me as a coach to know those default tendencies.
Why you're having the issues you're having.
Because then we're both aware of it and we can both recognize your wake-up calls. We can both see where you could be going and where the growth potential is. So it's so helpful for this deep inner work that we do in coaching.
Yes, it's the best. I'm so glad that we discovered this. So this is just a reminder because we're talking about coaching. So I want to give you the 411. Does anyone say that anymore? Probably not. You don't have to call that anymore. You can just Google it or ask Siri.
I'm sure the kids these days don't even know what that is.
I'm guessing not. It just always reminds me of The Parent Trap when you're right. What is the 411? Okay. About coaching is, you know that Kristen and I take on clients now in like official waves, quote unquote, and we're doing that again probably in October, but we'll get back to you on that. But we also have a wait list, and we have clients who are wrapping up regularly. And so we definitely draw from our wait list. And sometimes we draw from it immediately. Like if you fill out that form, we can talk to you right away. Sometimes we might have to wait a few weeks, but eventually we can totally talk to you about the possibility of coaching and get started probably sooner than the next wave of clients we end up taking on. So if you're like, I want to explore this, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll have a link to the episode description or to the wait list in the episode description, and then one of us will get back to you and we can put a time on the calendar now or in the future to talk about coaching. And
yeah, we would love to talk to you about your Enneagram profile and what that means, and we'd love to get into that with you.
So if you want to share your type or your thoughts about any of this stuff in the episode in the comments, then of course there will be a link to where this lives on our site, and you can leave us a comment in the episode description. Thank you for hanging in there with us for almost 2 hours of Enneagram content.
Yeah.
This was a lot. This was very heady.
If you're really,
you type 5s loved it.
If you're really into, you type 5s are going to go buy 6 books about the Enneagram right after this. I know that. But yeah, if you're really into it, there's so much more you can explore. We just scratched the surface, believe it or not. This was scratching the surface. But it's just such a really, really cool way of understanding yourself better, seeing the world differently, and understanding your hangups and why you keep getting hung up on the same stuff over and over again.
So that's it. We will see you on Tuesday with a blog. I think it should be a new blog finally from you.
It's been a while.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you then.
Bye.